You are listening to Spiritual Insurgency with Jason Lupo and Aaron Lujan, a show that brings reckoning to today's culture and the impact on the body of the church. No topic is off the table on the quest to take back our churches. Join Jason and Aaron and swim against the current of the modern culture.
Welcome to Spiritual Insurgency with Jason Lupo and Aaron Lujan. I am Aaron Lujan. Jason Lupo is going to be producing the show today, but we also have two very special guests. Just a guy, Jim Miller. What's up, bro?
Hello, hello.
And a very special guest, good friend of mine, Diego Morales. What is up, Diego?
What's going on?
So Diego is my favorite Gen Z in the whole world.
Borderline Gen Z.
Borderline Gen Z. What are you doing with? What are you doing with?
Research cutoff is like between millennial and Gen Z.
Okay, so you're an elder Gen Z.
Yeah, we'll say that.
Okay, and it's awkward that I'm having to look. I feel like we're driving a car and you're behind me right now.
Yeah, I'll just try to.
Well, we're gonna have an awkward conversation. We're in the car. He's in the back seat. I'm driving. Diego, tell us about yourself. So you're an elder Gen Z. I'm an elder millennial. So you're a sage to the Gen Z generation. You want to tell us about who you are and what you're up to?
Well, I'm afraid I don't have much to say, but hi, my name is Diego Morales. Love being here in Colorado Springs. I just traveled around Europe for 3 months, got a lot of insight into my own life, and I just love Gen Z, and I will support them all the way through. So.
Yeah, and you're a Catholic? Is that
I am a Catholic.
Yes. And so Diego, it fascinates me because he is a very devout Catholic. He's committed to his faith. Young man, Gen Z, and we were having lunch the other day, and he just felt like Gen Z is always getting crapped on, and we need to change that, don't we? Yeah. I have a lot of hope. I am not going to be crap on Gen Z. I was just in a study this morning, and I was actually in a group with a man about my age, elder millennials, so the old guys, and he has a ministry where he works specifically with young people and getting them to preach the gospel. And he's saying he's seen more people come to Christ than he's ever in his entire 25 years in ministry. So I think there is a revival happening. Would you agree with that?
I do agree that there is a major revival, but a lot of the crap that Gen Z is receiving is in fact Gen Z's fault. And we need to learn how to take responsibility where we can for what it is that is our fault.
So it's like best of worlds, both worst of worlds in Gen Z right now, right?
Yeah.
Well, today we have a really exciting article. LifeSiteNews.com released an article titled "Iowa School Children Will Now Be Required to Watch Video of Unborn Baby Developing." Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has signed into law a measure requiring public school students in grades 5 to 12 to have prenatal development education. So now Iowa school children must now watch pro-life fetal development films in school. I feel like that should be like a film noir genre, the pro-life fetal development genre.
It's already black and white.
It's already black and white. This is incredible news. Jim, what are your thoughts when you read this, when you heard this right now?
Oh, I hear it. It's like they're actually going to teach a biology class again and maybe be educational in what actually transpires with, the conception in life and growing and fetuses in the womb and all the utero stuff and everything else. I mean, that's just basic biology back in my time. I mean, we learned about that stuff with everything, whether it was people or even animals and stuff. So it just sounds like they're kind of kicking back to some actual education or knowledge back in the school environment. So I think it's pretty optimal, and it might be a good thing so people understand, especially the next generation, they understand what it's like in the real world and what happens with development and, how procreation actually works from the biological standpoints. Good science class, that's for sure.
Yeah, what I find so interesting about this development in Iowa is that this is because of technological development. Previous generations were never able to affirm scientifically, because that's the argument that our opponents like to make. We don't care what your Bible says, it's about the science. Well, now we have technology that's advanced so far that we can now have visual scientific backed evidence that there is life at conception, that we're witnessing when the egg meets the embryo, that immediately it's forming a nervous system and it's forming these pituitary glands, and there's life happening at conception. And so it's just kind of like the argument against life has been used against itself, because now we're arguing it along the lines of science. What are your thoughts when you hear this, Diego?
Well, fetuses have always been both living and human at the point of conception. And it's obvious by the fact, like, it has all of the genetic material from the very beginning. The moment the sperm meets the egg, it has all of the genetic material it needs to develop into a fully grown human being. And I just think that the argument that, oh, it's not fully developed, therefore it should be killable, that's never flown.
No.
Because human beings are always developing. And we're always reproducing our own cells at a cellular level, at a basic level. But yeah, we've both been, as an embryo, you are both physically 100% living and 100% human. It's scientific. It's proven. I don't think anybody can disprove that fact.
No, absolutely not. And I think the burden of proof is definitely on the the pro-choice side, because now they're having to face evidence of life on their terms.
Yeah.
Because their terms where we don't care what your book says, we care what science says. Trust the science.
Well, there's always been a lot of science with it. I mean, if I remember correctly from like old biology classes and stuff, like pretty much every mammal species starts out looking pretty similar from the start. I think it's till, what is it, like 6 weeks, then it starts doing differences.
Yeah.
Something like that. I don't know. But everything starts out kind of looking tadpole-y and stuff. And then also even with the initiation of the old egg contact and all, there's like a little big bang, a little electrical surge kind of zappy thing. And I mean, that's stuff from my era. So I don't know if it's necessarily technology. I think it just might be more of a reiteration and going, hey, here's what happens. You guys look at this. There's stuff happening here. There's life happening, and, look at it. Don't just dismiss it as just a thing, because that's the thing, is you do more disconnect things from humanity and as titled as a person, and then it's disconnected, and then there's no attachment, and there's no conscious like aspect of like, oh man, I just, did something, instead of being more accountable and one life, or understanding that there's a baby growing in your womb kind of thing. So it's, on a scientific stance, it's a good biology aspect, and then it keeps some humanity tied into it. So maybe people have, maybe the next generation has a little more conscious decisions about things.
To be clear, I don't understand why this is a political issue, and why one side of the political spectrum seems to be going further and further away from objectivity, scientific objectivity at that. The left used to claim that it was the party of science, and the party of reality, and the party of reason, essentially, and that the right was a party of, faith without reason. But nowadays we're seeing more and more the left pushing further into the realm of like, yeah, you can become surgically, a man can become a woman. Well, that's never been the case. And surgically, you can remove a child from the mother's womb, and it's not a killing, and you're completely free from any of the moral implications of that. That just simply is not the case. And I think the left really needs to examine their own beliefs and ask why they believe them, first and foremost.
Yeah, I think the left is getting put into a corner because there's two forces that are pushing the left into a corner on this issue. Number one, the basis in the terms in which they wanted to have this argument is now being used against them. And two, the traditional right, especially the Catholic Church, has momentum on their side. I mean, the overturning of Roe, there's similar legislation in Indiana, Idaho, Tennessee, North Dakota, and Kansas that have passed similar laws to this bill that we just passed in Iowa. So I'm incredibly encouraged. I think everyone can agree. And do you feel that there's momentum on our side?
I do feel that there is momentum. I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to say it's not enough. We need more.
Oh, absolutely.
And always, we need more people on the side of, truth. The more people we have on the side of truth, the better. I mean, period.
Yeah, and when I was talking about the left being put into a corner, the University of Chicago Department of Comparative Human Development graduate Steve Jacobs found that 96% of more than 5,500 biologists he surveyed agreed with the fact that the life is formed at conception. This is the dignity of human life. This is not a Catholic group, ladies and gentlemen. This is the University of Chicago. Calvin Freiberger,
you do better with names than Lupo does. So that's good. Good job.
He's long settled biological criteria and mainstream medical textbooks affirm that a living human being structurally and genetically distinct from his or her mother is created upon fertilization. So this is not the Catholic Church. These are not Christian pro-life groups. These are universities. These are biology groups. These are science groups. So I'm definitely encouraged. I wish the Protestant Church would follow the lead of my Catholic brothers and sisters, because you guys have been on the front lines consistently for decades fighting for life. So hats off to the Catholic Church. And I think this is a call to those self-described Protestants or whatever. You guys, we need to unite on this issue. I've said this before. This has to be the number one issue. If we as a culture do not affirm the dignity of life, we cannot have a conversation about immigration or economics or anything. This has to be the number one issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the scientific aspect of it. I mean, these are like your not as famous like Neil deGrasse Tyson types and stuff like going about this. So it's definitely not necessarily a religious thing. It's just the scientific aspect of it. But what's really crazy is like, this is Iowa. I mean, let's think about how like honestly like advanced as far as things Iowa is. I mean, that's like as far as most people understand, that's like the woods, you know what I mean? That's like the middle of nowhere nothingness. This isn't in New York. This isn't a just Chicago, you know, kind of thing. It's not somewhere in California where it's just all these universities and high tech this and that and stuff. This is Iowa
Corn.
going, hey, you guys like corn? Here's a biology class with some babies and stuff, you know? So it is interesting that a place like Iowa is the place like going, no, here's real science, real biology, not a bunch of universities in Iowa. I think they just have the University of Iowa there.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that somewhere so small is like taking the stance on it in this aspect.
And I think it has to do with the fact that they're farmers, because you're closer to the earth and you get to really see the biological reality of things, the objective reality of things. Being like any of the hands-on labor, it's like carpentry, farming, any of it.
Sure. Yeah. But here's my question, because this stands in direct opposition to the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that most Americans are pro-choice. Gallup, Pew, and Marist have all found for the past several years that the overall growing majority in this country identifies as pro-choice. So in light of all of this pressure, in light of the overturning of Roe, all the scientific advancements affirming the argument that pro-life people have been making, why is it that the increasing majority of Americans are still pro-choice?
That's a very good question. And I think it depends on how you define pro-choice. Like the vast majority of Americans, I should say, are not anti-baby. Let's put it like that. So many people still believe that you should have your child, but the limitations come about as where the abortion or contraception should take place. And so I find when I'm speaking to people, a lot of the issue tends to be, it's not even about when the baby is viable, but it's about when, I'm having trouble articulating this statement, but.
No, I think what you're saying is at what point is the baby called life? At what point is it a human? Is that what you're getting at?
Mm-hmm. And also specifically, I think it's the cases of rape and incest, which people have a lot of trouble getting around and navigating that issue in particular, even though that's like less than a 1%.
It's an argumentative tactic.
So it is an argumentative tactic, but it still does happen, unfortunately.
It still works, yes.
So your question was, why do so many people identify as pro-choice?
Despite all of this momentum.
So I think what it is that this is an issue that shouldn't be politicized. This is household stuff that is up to your faith and so forth, and your morals, values, your ethics. It shouldn't even be politicized one bit, one iota at all. It's one of those things where you got a bunch of filthy career politicians leveraging people, and most people are going like, look, man, politics is supposed to be infrastructure, security, and then enforcing your rights, your liberties, your freedoms of religion, choice, and so forth, and all this stuff in your life. That's what it's supposed to be for as far as politics go. These types of things aren't supposed to be politicized. So I think that's why most people just decide that they're just like, no, I'm pro-choice. So, yeah, I mean.
But Jim, isn't the reality, though, that it has to be politicized because this is going to end up either being protected by the law or not being protected by the law?
I think more government is actually never, ever the answer. I think as a whole, the real true solution is always people having more knowledge, better morals, values, ethics, more of a sense of community and stuff. And I don't think necessarily diverting those to nothing more than a political sense is actually the answer as a law, a rule, a fee, a fine, a tax. I think honestly the answer, and I've stood by this and said this a number of times, it's why I say if you want to better, be better. We need to be a better community. We need to be better people. Diverting all of it to politics and laws and rules and fees and fines and taxes ain't the answer. It's also not necessarily, because there is people that aren't religious. That's why I always say the morals, values, and the ethics and sense of community is the answer. It's also not just the religious aspect too. So politics isn't the answer. More government's not the answer.
I agree with a ton of that statement, but I would say that in a lot of cases, culture is a byproduct of the laws that surround it. So it's a problem in that if we are not able to legislate it, or like basically, let's say abortion would make completely illegal, then people would, claim that as morality. Like,
you can't legislate morality, goodness, or decency with anybody. You can't legislate or make laws on, just people being good people. The other part too is we're never holding anybody bad to any consequence. We don't shun people, or we're so openly accepting to everything. Oh, be accepting, be open, be under the guise of diversity with so many things in the modern era that we don't even, like, if people do something wrong, nobody's like, yeah, don't hang out with that person. They do terrible stuff. We don't do a lot of this stuff no more. Politics and laws, they're not the answer to it. We just need to be much better people. Sure. And the argument too is always, it's so impossible. How can you get people to be good? Just be the example. Practice what you preach. If you're going to say something, actually be doing something. Don't talk it, do it. For crying out loud, lead by example, be an actual leader, because they even do that too. They just throw the word leader out there left and right to where it's got no meaning. Everybody demands respect, but nobody actually ever earns it no more. It's a bit ridiculous. Just be better people, be a better community. The law isn't the answer. It doesn't make you a better person following the law. Be a better person.
People are still going to choose to murder their babies. And so if we're going to live in a country that defends life, in my world, if we in the United States followed and adhered to a biblical worldview, abortion would be murder, and the mother and the abortionist would be charged for murder in a sane, just, and moral society.
I get what you're saying, and you're doing it to where you're making it almost sound like I'm arguing for abortion. That's not what I'm saying.
That wasn't my
not even close, but it was making it kind of sound like that. That's not what I'm saying.
Well, that was your interpretation, but that wasn't my intent.
Good, because that's not what I'm doing.
What I think you were doing is you were being ideological, and I think you were not taking into consideration the reality on the ground, which is people are going to want to have an abortion, and people are going to want to defend babies from being murdered. That's always existed, going back to sacrifices to Moloch. And here we are again today, still providing human sacrifice to Moloch. We're just doing it in a more sanitized way. And we, the church, and using the Catholic Church as an example, has always been a bulwark and always been a voice in the culture to affirm the dignity of life and say abortion is murder. And we wanted Roe overturned. We want this to go back to the states, and we want the states to pass full bans. We're calling on every state house legislature to pass a full ban on abortion. Follow the heartbeat bills. Follow these bills in Iowa. We need to be promoting a culture of life, and it's going to be a bottom-up strategy. And so if people are going to want to not be virtuous, they will not have freedom, because virtue is a prerequisite for freedom. So long as this is a country that stands on the side of life, the people that want to murder their children are going to have to turn blue in the face and fight it for the rest of their lives. But we shall never retreat. We shall never surrender. We're defending innocent life.
And our laws do show what we value as a nation. So what is it that we value?
Yes.
It's values and ethics show what you value. Just because the country makes a law about something that is not a direct reflection on
it is a
goodness.
Reflection, though.
Yeah,
it's not always a reflection of the goodness of you or yourself, or not morals, values, or ethics. So, but your statement is slightly fallible, because you're saying, "Oh, the laws are all good." Well, so sanctuary cities and stuff, because they do that and make it a law. It's a reflection of what you are.
That can address that.
Very broad.
Yeah, I would love to address that. It shows the morality of the collective. What your nation's laws are.
Our role isn't really optimal either.
Well, yeah, but you've got the individual, right? You've got what each of us believes on an individual.
This is a country that's based on individual freedom,
Yeah.
not mob rules.
Or rather,
Used to be.
you can't deny the fact that we are
It's definitively the individual freedom and the morals, values, and ethics of the individual, not the mob rules. So your statement's pretty valid.
I'm saying both can exist. You've got the individual, and then you've also got the collective. We do live in a nation with borders. What do we believe as a nation? That makes us different from France, Germany, Canada.
Why they have borders, they have laws and rules. Is that the direct reflection of their culture and their society and everybody there's morals, values, and ethics too?
I think
In some ways, yes.
So you're leaving victims, but you're trying to make definitives with the statement at the same.
But he never made the claim that our laws are an absolute reflection of a nation. I think
2-on-1. I like this. This is fun. So look, be better people, guys. Don't go out and just have an abortion, spreading your legs, being gross and disgusting, going to the pub and the bar. Be better. You're better than that. You're worth more than that. Your value as an individual, a man or a woman, it's very high. You had a 1 in a 400 trillion chance to exist. Legislating morality, making laws about it, isn't going to make it any better. It usually makes it worse, because I will tell you right now, because they want to talk about the collective. If you start telling me I can't do something, what happens? I get morally defiant. I get subconsciously defiant. I start defying things because nobody tells me what to do. And that sometimes is what happens with a lot of people with things. And they sometimes just take an opposing stance, regardless of all the information, knowledge, all the facts and everything to it. And they start being defiant in the worst sense of the way.
I want to ask you a question.
Shoot.
You're resting your argument on you cannot legislate morality. So are you making that statement in what context to this article, or is that just more of a general?
It's kind of more general, but with this article and stuff, is that it's a good thing they're showing the next generation how.
So aren't they legislating morality by saying you have to watch these videos because we believe
they made it a course in a class for an educational thing, and I'm not part of the educational thing.
But isn't
a lot of stuff going on? They teach math. I mean, is that
this legislating morality though?
Well, they got requirements for math. Is that legislating morality, or is that legislating
the moral issue? Math is a.
I hear you, but this is an educational type thing. So if we're going to make this argument, then is the math, is the reading curriculum legislating morality, or is it just actually an educational thing to teach?
Or maybe we could take it to a broader example.
Would you always get broader because it's easier to be broader? Go ahead.
Well, it is easier, but it's also easier to conceptualize. So it's like, would you agree with laws against murder in general?
Yeah, don't rape, don't murder, don't steal. It's pretty simple to morality.
That is in itself a legislation of morality. That's an example of it. I mean, morality is always legislated, but it's legislated on the collective level. You know what I'm saying?
We as a
you as an individual, you're free. Anybody's free to believe that, oh yeah, I would love to murder somebody. Anybody's free to believe that. But they're not allowed it by the collective. And we should be doing exactly the same thing for abortions.
I agree. Like you have a very strong stance, and I agree with your stance against child sex abusers. You want them to have the death penalty.
Oh, I do.
That would be legislating your morality, because your morality is these are the worst possible people on the planet, and they should.
I didn't say don't legislate. I just said it's not the answer to everything. The real answer is to be a better society.
Of course, but you could.
That is the real answer.
Be a better person.
Politics every single time is not the proper answer. That's like giving aspirin because you got cancer.
Sure.
But would you agree we can be better people and legislate it at the same time?
Jason Lupo's
building. Would you agree with that? Oh.
So I'm going to jump in here. I started a camera over here. I'm going to jump in here because legislating morality is not where you guys are taking this conversation. Legislating morality means that you can punish somebody for a crime, but ultimately you cannot change their view of what is right and wrong by punishing them or legislating it.
Yeah.
And so there's a conversation. It was interesting. I was sitting over here scrolling through Facebook. Somebody suggested we should have a punishment for adultery. Well, obviously, you know, the Coldplay stuff broke the internet this last week, and
divorce is.
And somebody goes, "Well, we should punish those that commit adultery." Well, the problem is this: you can't legislate morality because you can't change somebody's inward being by simply creating laws. And that is what legislating morality is implying. It's not implying that you can't tell people what's right and wrong. It's saying that just because you punish somebody for a crime doesn't mean that you're going to change them morally. This came a lot about when it came to sin taxes, right?
Yeah.
Here I am smoking a cigar right now. Why do we have sin taxes? Well, sin taxes is a way to, quote unquote, attempt to legislate morality, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a punishment that outweighs an incentive. Like an incentive is, I want to smoke, or maybe you want to drink. I don't drink. And so if we tax it heavy enough, we can get the public to change their perception.
It's like the gun taxes, the soda taxes in New York and Chicago and Detroit and all that stuff. But they're like, oh, here it's healthier. No, that's what I'm trying to articulate. I'm just not the best at it. Thank you.
So that is what legislating morality means. Now, when it comes to this conversation, is forcing children to watch this in a way trying to legislate morality, you could make that argument if you wanted.
I'd write it's more educational and knowledge-based in my personal opinion, like teaching math or history or science or any of that. That's what I think.
I think it's a very fair argument, because you could flip it on its head and say in the Middle East, they ascribe to Sharia law, and Sharia law believes that it's punishable by death to be a homosexual, which is why Sharia law supports homosexuals being thrown to their death off of roofs. Now, they're legislating morality because their morality is that. Whether you agree or disagree with it, that's their morality. And I think in the West, in Christendom, the United States is a product of Christendom in the West, and our system was built on a biblical worldview. And our morality is that life is sacred. And we're going to legislate that by requiring in our educational laws that you are going to watch prenatal development videos. And I also would go further, like I said a moment ago, and make the abortionist and the mother serve a murder punishment if they were to murder the baby. That is this conversation, I think, of legislating morality. Morality is all, but to Jim's point, there is no freedom without virtue. You have to be a virtuous person in order to enjoy these freedoms. And because we live in a world where we no longer collectively honor virtue, we no longer agree on biblical morality, we now have the problem that Jim pointed out, which is it's a political issue, which it never should have been. I agree with you, Jim. If we lived in a righteous, virtuous society, we wouldn't be killing our babies. Therefore, we wouldn't need the government to say, hey, bud, you probably shouldn't kill your baby. It's bad. Because if we lived in a virtuous society, we would all agree.
But to take it further with it, let's be honest, because of so many legislated laws and stuff, let's be straight. So you have a just hypothetical. Diego meets some lady in, where were you at? Ireland or something, you said? Whatever. You were in Europe. And you met a lady.
She's redhead and she's...
You met a lady in freaking Europe. You guys had a good time, couple drinks, whatever.
She's
something led to something, nobody cares. The point being, you knock her up, she gets prego, right? So what happens with that nowadays? There's laws and stuff that goes, you have to pay child supports, all this other stuff, all these other things, and you don't even get necessarily a right to see your own kid if it does transpire in a sense, which also helps push towards people going, oh, better freaking have an abortion. There's things going on in multiple layers, lots of spokes on this wheel that push things to that end of the stuff that nobody ever thinks of. Because if you're not married to this lady and you didn't really have a thing and whatever, it was a moral, ethical slip up in society, you're out there partying and having a good old time, and big-breasted freaking lass comes up from Ireland and is like, hey, you want a pint? And you're like, oh boy, I'd love to pint all these. And it happens, and you get her knocked up. What's it pushed to for most men in your generation, your era? Oh, I don't want to pay child support for the rest of my life for a kid I'm never going to see. So it helps push also the abortion thing. There's a lot of stuff that isn't seen. Once again, it is just being better people. And most of these things are pushed to be laws, and they have to be enforced, and you knock up a lady and stuff and get no say in nothing, and da-da-da, and it's like, oh, well, I'll abort it because I don't want to pay things. That's what a lot of younger men make decisions on, because they go, oh, I'm going to lose my whole income and my whole life to things. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying there's things that these laws push that push more things to a moral bad place all the time.
But laws also shape culture. And if Diego was 7 years old as a little boy in Iowa and he's watching these prenatal videos and he meets the 5'11" redheaded lass in Ireland, he's not going to knock her up, because he knows that if he goes to her hotel room, he might get her pregnant, and he doesn't intend to have a baby, because law shaped his worldview, because law can impact culture, because we have a moral...
Going down this rabbit hole too of men being present in the family and fathers.
So and that's the rabbit hole that we ultimately should go down, because
Yes.
this idea of legislating morality is just it's a phrase that's used in situations like this to generate conversation, but ultimately it turns out it's a worldview issue. It's always a worldview issue. It's not a legislative issue.
Yeah.
And so when you continue to try to force people to behave in a certain way because the punishment is strong enough, that's ultimately the same way that I say, hey, we should bring back public hangings. We'd probably see a lot less murders if we brought back public hangings in the public square, right? It's a conversation like that where it's like, is the punishment big enough to incentivize somebody not to commit it?
Yeah, because there is an aspect of that of consequences, true dire consequences, and people start reacting better. You are right.
Yeah, I would love to address that, because I think in a way morality is legislated. Because some people fallaciously attribute the existence of a law, something being legal with something being moral. Now, that may be a fallacy, but a lot of people do it. They don't have any baseline for their own personal morality. They look at the law and says, oh, well, abortion's legal, must be at the very least okay and not morally reprehensible. They would look at the law to serve their own whatever you call it. You could call it their own moral baseline, I think is what we should say. So people do it, and in that way, morality
do it.
Yeah, but in that way, morality legislation does indeed affect morality.
So we used to have in this country a strong understanding of what was moral law. And actually moral law in a great sense is actually protected. Your moral law is protected. So if the government says that you have to do something and it goes against your morality, that is an actual argument to say, hey, I'm not following this law, which is what
Could be applied to religious freedom and so forth too, because that's where a lot of it
is freedom, things like
And as a community, we used to congregate a lot more, whether it was church or ice cream socials or whatever, to kind of come together and be like, man, that's terrible. Oh, this is actually good. We should be better like this and be a better community. We don't do much of that anymore.
Can we agree across the board that that is a good thing and that we should be doing more of that?
Which part?
Congregating.
Yeah, well, one way or another. I have my own issues with organized religion and the pollution because it's become politicized too, because I hate politicized everything personally.
Yeah.
It makes things gross and disgusting, even with the best of intents.
Aaron's been waiting to take this away. Aaron,
Take it away, Aaron.
Well, I think the nuance is that the law can serve two masters. The law can exact consequence and punishment when you transgress the law, but law can also impact culture. I mean, the article that we're discussing is a law to guide the educational system. That is not an exact or a judgment on or a consequence that's being ascribed to some sort of transgression. Law in this case is influencing culture. Is it not? And so if we're going to foster a biblical worldview, what better way to do that than to take these impressionable young children in the Iowa school system and show them, wow, life actually begins at conception. I actually have a biblical worldview.
So I've been studying Freakonomics. I don't know if you've ever read the book. Freakonomics. It's great. No.
I have not yet. No.
In the introduction, they bring up the fact that crime rates had decreased even amongst the time when all of the scholars were saying crime rates are going to be skyrocketing. And what the authors of Freakonomics said was when it started to decline, they had no clue why. But truly, it was actually taking place previously, decades before, with the passage of Roe versus Wade. And what the authors said was that with the introduction of Roe versus Wade, you shrunk the criminal pool. You shrunk the pool of people that were most likely to be criminals. So the problem with that is Freakonomics does not look at it from a biblical worldview, which is actually something I'm writing right now, is looking at Freakonomics from a biblical worldview. But they should have said, okay, now that we know this information, if it's correct, which we can argue that it's not correct, then how do we change the community of people that are most likely to get an abortion? How do we get them to keep their kids, but raise them in such a way that they don't become part of the criminal pool? And I know this is pretty hot topic right now and probably really controversial. We're probably going to get some emails. We've gotten plenty of emails the last couple of weeks on this show.
Hold up.
But yeah, go ahead, send an email. Tell us how you disagree.
Where are you from?
It's very interesting to look at because the authors go, the crime rate decreased because of Roe versus Wade. Now, there's no way of directly correlating that, but that is what they heavily employ.
Well, that's like going prohibition's not in play no more, so crime went down. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of stuff with a lot of this. There's a lot of spokes on this wheel, if you will. I mean, there's things too, like if you don't want your kid, there's people out there that are trying to have kids that can't. They can be adopted. There's lots of avenues and other things to do. I think I touched part of the point with too that thing of like, oh, well, I had a kid with you. It's all child support and stuff. Oh, a divorce, it's child support, alimony. You got to pay, which are laws. These are court-derived, court-ordered laws. So that's why I don't agree with all the laws make it right.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it morally right. It actually promotes the opposite and also does push towards, why would you want to be a single dude that has a kid out there when really you'd want to participate, all right? If you did knock up a lady and it didn't work out or whatever it is, a one-nighter, you'd want to be involved. But with the laws, you don't get to be involved.
Right.
There's lots of men out there that have somebody they've gotten pregnant that they're not in a relationship with, they're not married with. It was a one-nighter, it was a one-off, it was a girlfriend, it didn't work out, she left, and they don't see their kids, and they just pay money because that's the law, which pushes many young men and other people that are going to be single or whatever or not be a family for abortion too. And then fathers not being present and that kind of stuff because that gets really promoted with it. Like, what are you going to do? It's alimony and child support. Don't get any say in your kid. So there's just a lot of things that create a lot of these moral and societal and family problems that also push towards things such as abortion.
This is post-sexual revolution conversation. During the 60s, in the sexual revolution, we changed our definition of sex. It was no longer a covenant between one man and one woman in the holy matrimony. This became recreational. This became lustful. This became do thou wilt. We adopted
orphans.
We adopted an animal kingdom mentality. We divorced ourselves from our God who gave us sex as a gift, a powerful, powerful gift to unite with one person forever and create human life. That's where we went wrong. And the reason we're having this messy conversation is because we as a society and as a culture have divorced ourselves from virtue. We lost our virtue during the sexual revolution. That was a dereliction of our grandfather's generation, and we need to reclaim that. And this is not going to be solved on Fox News or on these secular shows. It's called spiritual insurgency for a reason. We need to change the culture. We need to be a culture that promotes fatherhood, that promotes marriage, and promotes a worldview that Jim isn't going to get pissed off. We're not going to legislate morality because everyone's going to be virtuous.
It goes back to this. Laws are there to protect three things. They've always been there to protect three things: life, liberty, property. That is what the government is there to do, is to enact laws that protect life, liberty, property. Now, we already know that they step on liberty all the time.
Constantly.
Right? Now, the argument becomes, with abortion, are you protecting life by enacting some of these laws? That's one of the critical questions that we need to answer. That's not a question we're probably going to get to today. But when we talk about morality, for instance, going back to the Coldplay issue and should we criminalize adultery, the problem is that when you criminalize adultery, you haven't changed hearts. And so really we need to look at changing hearts, and you can't do that from a
Hearts, mind,
legislative standpoint. Because if you punish somebody and said, hey, if you cheat on your wife, we're going to throw you in jail for 14 days, I bet money on it that person's going to come back out and they're going to cheat again.
They're just going to be better at it.
Well, our biblical worldview would never want to punish adultery because those are two consenting adults and it didn't impact or it infringe on anyone's rights. The biblical worldview establishes that,
isn't that one of the 10
what you just said, life, liberty, property, that's what we are going to, that's the role of government and that's the role of legislation from a biblical worldview.
Well, keep in mind, before Jesus, it was punishable by death.
But Jesus was the new covenant.
Jesus was the new covenant, and that's why Jesus said, hey, those who have not sinned, you cast the first stone.
Thank you.
Nobody could cast that stone. Going back to what Jim just said, in terms of, and you have to remind me, you said something that I wanted to touch on, and it just left my mind.
Which part? The absent fathers, child support, laws.
When Aaron was talking, you said something.
Which part was he talking about?
I don't remember. We'd have to re-roll the clip.
Sorry.
But anyways, when it comes to this conversation of moral law versus legal law or governmental law, you mentioned the 10 Commandments, right?
Yeah.
The 10 Commandments. The question becomes, do we take those 10 Commandments and base the United States legislation off of those 10 Commandments? Is adultery a governmental law, or is it a moral law? Is it God's law? Is it a law for believers?
Yeah, I think Scripture is very clear on the role of government, and the first thing that comes to mind is that God instituted government for His goodwill. I think as Bible believers, we can all agree that that's what Scripture says on the role of government. So what is His goodwill? His goodwill is to know God and to find Him. So that means that there's going to be a lot of free will and a lot of behavior that will not be morally legislated because it is a hard issue. However, it is God's will that the innocent's defended, which is why we need to have anti-abortion laws. It's God's will to defend people's personal property and fairness and weights and measures. So Scripture is very instructive on what is the role of government. If you look at our founding fathers, these were very devout Bible readers and believers. And through their letters and established upon Magna Carta and all of these preceding documents that are based on biblical worldview, they came to the conclusion that God's intention was for people to have freedom of religion, to pursue God however they want, that there wouldn't be any government that would tell them how to worship, and free speech and personal property.
So let me give this article as an example here, because this is presently going on in Allington, England. Every year, 1,000 swingers come to Allington, England to have a giant swinger fest.
Is that like when you go
they're all
planes?
No, they're all sleeping with each other.
Like they go to sleep?
Yeah, they go as couples, they go as individuals, they just sleep around. This goes on for 3 days. They come from all over the place. I mean, these events aren't just happening in England. These events are happening all over the world right now. That tells you the moral decline that we have.
My virgin years.
And the decline of understanding what that covenant is between a man and a woman. We've come so far away from what is morality. So the question really boils down to this, which is, do you have the ability to legislate from a governmental perspective the change of hearts in men?
No.
And I think we can all answer that question as no. And that's what the conversation goes back to, legislating morality. Now, if these children are not being taught any sort of values, to put an actual biology class that actually teaches these things into an Iowa school system or in any school system, is that legislating morality, or is that simply providing them with the information and education that they deserve to have as children growing up?
I think it's knowledge and education is what it's doing. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think it's one part both.
Yeah.
Because on the one end, it is a moral issue, and it is a cultural issue that came about with the start of the sexual revolution, when people believed that consequence-free sex existed via contraceptive pill. The chemical pill was introduced. It is also a legislated issue, which is governed by morality, but the legislative issue is that people believe that you can have consequence-free abortions, and that is allowed, and it is legal. So I'd say one part both. Yeah.
Well, and that idea of consequence-free abortion, we know to be false. There's no such thing as consequence-free abortion.
You'll have your cake and eating it too and all that crap. Yeah.
There's plenty of research that shows psychological implications. There's plenty of research that shows the physical implications. There's no such thing as a, what did you just call it?
I'm sorry.
A risk-free, sinless, whatever, consequence-free abortion. It does not exist.
No, I mean, you talk to mothers who've had abortions, they're wrecked for life, man.
They have a lot of regret.
Real
bad, and they have reflection upon it in a negative sense constantly, emotionally, mentally.
And there should be more support structures for them, specifically, within the political right, but it shouldn't be a political issue. It should be an everybody issue. There needs to be more for them. So my heart goes out to them.
Yeah. No, the church needs to do a better job.
But that goes back to what I was saying. Some guy's going to get stuck paying child support, and he pushes for it. So, that's part of what pushes some of that with some of the women, too.
Well, I guess that wraps it up, guys. What do you think? I think we pretty much beat this horse to a bloody pulp. Would you agree?
The bloodiest.
Let's take a brief time out. While we come back, we're going to finish the show. Don't go anywhere.
Teamwork is at the core of any successful organization. Full Armor Sports, led by national champion coach Jason Lupo, is now registering for school year sports programs. Full Armor is a multi-sport teaching and training organization with homeschool options available. All of Full Armor sports coaches are certified and experts in their field. Full Armor's coaches combine for over 500 years of coaching experience. They will help your kids gain fundamental skills, the concepts of teamwork, essential to being successful throughout their lives. Multiple sports options are available now, from swimming, softball and volleyball, to powerlifting and youth MMA. The faith-based approach to making sports fun and productive are a great choice for your kids at Full Armor Sports Teams. Learn more at fullarmorsportsteams.com.
Welcome back to Spiritual Insurgency. I'm Jason Lupo with my host that started the show, Aaron Lujan. What's happening, brothers? This wasn't going to come on the show, but here anyways. Diego.
Very good.
And just a guy, Jim Miller.
Lolo.
We had a long conversation during this break about basically the whole idea of morality as we talked about previously. And I wanted to contextualize this from the perspective of where is our moral compass rooted? And when we talk about biblical morality, it's rooted back scripturally. Not to say that all churches right now are following biblical morality or teach biblical morality, but the morality of people that aren't rooted in Christianity or aren't rooted in any religion, their morality changes, whereas biblical morality has always been the same. It's never changed. What is God's morality, what is God's law has never changed, whereas human beings, as we saw with that article with the swingers, what is moral for the culture abroad and the culture in general that haven't subscribed to a specific morality is changing, whereas our morality being rooted in Christianity or our morality being rooted in something else does not change. And that's not to say that somebody that's not a hardcore Christian doesn't have a moral compass that is not changing, but the vast majority of culture in general has morality that's continually shifting. And that's the point that I think that is important to make.
Yeah, I think we're in a culture war, and in a culture war, you have culture warriors, and some of those warriors are on the side of evil, and some of those warriors are on the side of good. Now, Benedict Arnold exists, Judas exists, so there's a lot of people that portray
Those guys suck.
the wolves in sheep's clothing. You know, there will be tares among the wheat. So when you have people that claim to be on the side of good, that call themselves church-going, that call themselves Christians, and they behave in a way that's counter to the gospel, does not change the gospel message, does not change the morality. So I think what I'm basically saying, repeating what Jason's saying, is that the truth is unchanging. The way the truth is handled is changing all the time, and that's what's up for contest. That's what we're contending for, is to change the hearts and minds of the culture.
The way the truth is leveraged or manipulated.
Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, is what Scripture says. So what it's saying is there's different ways you can look at the world and at these issues. If you conform to God's truth and you see it the way He sees it, you will have a renewal of the mind. And as your mind changes, it'll change your heart, and then your outward fruit will be that good behavior. We're constantly arguing people that don't share our worldview. They're always going to have a different perspective on the matter. Our job is to lead by example and not to judge the message necessarily by the messengers, because a lot of the messengers on our side of this are corrupt as all hell. In fact, I have more problems with Republicans and evangelical Christians than I do with Democrats and atheists, personally.
Yeah, I could see that, because they put it under the guise of like, oh, it's religious, I did this, or it's a thing, or this is the right reason, or I'm aligned because I'm in the same political party or go to the same church or something. Why really they're just leveraging stuff to their own advantageous reasonings and lack of morals.
They're shaming the gospel. Yes, Diego.
And we're supposed to be held to a higher standard.
Right.
Basically, when atheists act like beasts, essentially, like, believing in evolutionary theory, they're acting in line with their moral beliefs. When we, Christians, Catholics also, when we act when we act like beasts, we are acting outside of our own premises. Basically, we're not supposed to be like that. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, that's like right here. Technically speaking, with everything we're talking about, our morals, values, and ethics at this whole gathering are similar, but even we're arguing about things. We're arguing on how to set it up, how to display it, how to push it out, how to spread the better moral value or ethical aspect of this stuff. But even we're arguing on it because it's not the ends. We all pretty much want the same ends. It's just the means that we're arguing with. And to be very frank, so everybody out there listening, I'm the least religious person here. I don't like organized religion. I think the Bible's got a lot of good messages, good word in it, good stuff in it. That's a good way to live and stuff. I truly believe that. But I don't have any good experiences with organized religion. I mean, a lot of my experiences in life have been pretty negative, so I have a more negative and candid look at things. I don't look at it with like, oh, it's rainbow sunshine, powdered sugar, and flowers and rainbows. I'm not that person. I'm not trying to stay being negative about things, but I'm trying to look at it from a better perspective, but it's a little more difficult for people like me, and especially kind of finding the route and the way and the balance of everything. So it is what it is, but really we all want the same thing. We want it to be a better world, because regardless of any of us, we all agree 100% of the time. We want it better. That 10-20% differential of anybody that's a good person, that's a lot of kitchen table issues and things that shouldn't be politicized and shouldn't be really argued with, because the morals, values, and ethics are quite similar and we want the same outcome. So I think, too, we need to do a little more getting along and going along better, too, and talking, not yelling. That always helps.
So I think going back to what Aaron said earlier with the Democrats, the Republicans, each have a party platform, and the party platform is written pretty clearly. The Democrats are 100% committed to that party platform. Now, we're starting to see that change just a tad bit because the party platform has gotten so woke and so far left. But the Republicans, there's so many Republicans that don't really subscribe to that party platform. And that's where we have this issue where it looks like the Republican Party is not always in agreement, because they're not always in agreement with what the party platform is. Just like when we have this conversation in regards to Christians who don't necessarily look or act or have the same moral values, worldviews, they're not actually subscribed to biblical morality. They're subscribed back to their own humanistic nature. And so if we want to have this conversation, we have to differentiate the fact that human beings are still sinful in nature, and that human beings, not all of them are going to subscribe to biblical morality and act it out in a way that they should, probably because they haven't truly been renewed with the Holy Spirit. And that would be the argument that you would make there.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we did in this Iowa bill is we took a play out of the left's playbook, because they're experts at grooming. Grooming is another way of saying indoctrinating. Indoctrinating is another way of influencing a person at a very vulnerable age, right? Isn't that what the left has been doing since the Obama years, going in with the drag queen story hour?
Because they're young and they're sponges and their minds are more
sexual education,
more
grooming,
and ethically.
Sexual education, all this, which is all fruits, because again, I digress, but sexual education is in the world of the living room, not in the classroom. But the point is that what we're doing as cultural warriors for truth is we're going to these youth, and I would say we're grooming them into truth. We're grooming them into biology. We're grooming them into the fact that they were woven and wonderfully made, and they were looked upon by their creator lovingly, and every aspect of their personality was designed by a loving master creator. And they're looking at this in the context of video and scientific evidence. And I think that right there is so much more powerful, because we're not going to be arguing with these people in 15, 20 years, because they're going to have a worldview that was established at a young age, that life is sacred. And so that's exactly the playbook on how we're going to do this.
So them understanding that, hey, man, it's like 1 in a 400 trillion chance for you to be born and exist in the first place.
Yes, amen.
Something good with it. Be
a good person.
Take that small chance to exist and be a good human being. Try to. You're going to fail on the way, but try.
And we were talking about that point, being a good human being. And this is going to help with those premises. Like the very first premises these kids are going to get in the beginning is that, yes, life is precious. And therefore, you should respect all life in all forms. And that's going to make you better members of the community, better neighbors, better fathers, better mothers for your children. It's going to affect you all across the board in ways that we have not analyzed and we don't have scientific studies on, but it's going to work. It's cultural.
Exactly. Everything's downstream, right?
Right.
Well, and Iowa's a really interesting and fascinating place to look at in terms of presidential elections and in terms of their politics, because it very much is a swing state. And if you look at the last couple elections, I mean, Donald Trump got the vote in the last 3 from Iowa, but before that it was Barack Obama, and then before that George Bush was who Iowa chose.
Didn't they vote for Clinton too?
They voted for Clinton.
Yeah.
They voted for Al Gore in 2000.
Yeah.
It's a very purple state.
Iowa's kind of crazy.
And so to look at Iowa, but if you look at Iowa, right, their Democrats are traditional Democrats, they're centrist Democrats. And so I think it's going to be very hard for a Democrat to win in Iowa for the next decade or so, only because they don't care about that woke ideology. Number one, a lot of them, the farmers, have been sold to this idea that the Democrats are for the farmers, which I think is an absolute joke. But that's what they've been sold. They've been sold a false bag of goods in that respect. That's a whole nother conversation. But in terms of morality, the people in Iowa are not for this woke ideology. I think that's why we're seeing this start to shift.
Yeah, and I think that there is a law that required the Bibles to be removed from schools at some point in our history in this country. And I think that was a law that directly shaped culture, because no longer were you allowed, because the First Amendment was saying there should be no establishment of religion. What was the law that was passed, and Jason, I think, is talked about this for years ad nauseum, is that first speech protection doesn't mean removal of Christianity out of the schools. What it means is you don't establish Christianity as some sort of state religion, and that was misinterpreted. And I think that was a critical failure in our history when we made it law to remove Holy Scripture and the truth out of our school system. Because in a society of free speech, the Bible should be permissible, like Mein Kampf, like Quran, like anything. My kids are going to read the Quran. My kids are going to read Communist Manifesto. I'm not afraid of that, because they're going to be reading that in context to the truth, and they're going to be allowed to make their own decisions. What we had was an attack, a direct attack on Christianity, and it impacted the culture by law when we removed the Bible out of the schools.
Well, and we have seen 2 states put the 10 Commandments back in the classroom. That would be Texas and Louisiana, with many states currently looking at doing the same.
And Louisiana's real big on getting rid of the sexual predators and the pedos and all that stuff, too. So shout out to Louisiana. I like what Louisiana's been doing lately.
Well, this has been Spiritual Insurgency. Join us every day online, YouTube and Rumble. Have a great day. God bless.
Peace.
Want to better, be better.
Thank you for joining us today on Spiritual Insurgency with Jason Lupo and Aaron Lujan. For more information or to support the mission of Spiritual Insurgency, visit spiritualinsurgency.org. Join us next Saturday and every Saturday at 10 a.m.